Yeah, get comfy in the chair, man.
Trying.
Andrew,
I'm out here.
how are you?
Yeah, not too bad, bro. Not too bad.
Dude, what a, wow.
Yeah, that was an insightful conversation, that one.
Honestly, Sheryl Mai, you know how when you start a project
Yeah.
and you have like a list of these are the people I'd like to get,
Yeah.
you know, and you kind of have those important milestone people and you go, yes.
Yeah.
To have Sheryl in was, for me, absolutely huge.
Yeah. Nah, and it was a huge conversation. It felt like it could have gone on for a lot longer.
It did. It really did. Like, it was one of those ones where it was like, okay, we're going to keep going. Let's keep going.
Yeah.
You know, and she's, you know, she was just so incredibly giving of herself. 83 days as of when this podcast is recorded.
Yeah.
You know, by the time it comes out, it'll be, blah, 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 what are we, Monday? And it'll be, hers comes out on the 28th, and today
around
is
60 days.
And today is the 18th, so 73 days by the time the
Pretty
podcast,
much. Around.
give or take.
Yeah.
You know, but man, she gave.
Yeah. No,
She
it was yeah, very candid.
It was.
Wasn't like her mayoral columns.
No, it wasn't. It was just, she was just prepared to go
Yeah.
and go and go and go, and she talked so much, and you know, she really delved into her past as well.
Yeah. And was very open about it. And it was really, really cool to hear from someone in that position to kind of not let loose, but, you know, kind of give us some insight into the human being she actually is.
I know. And for me, that was absolutely amazing. So, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let us sit down and have a conversation with Sheryl Mai. Sheryl Mai, welcome to Five Elements Media Studio on the Northland Artist Conversation. I have to say it is a very, very much an honour and a privilege to have you here today. So thank you for coming.
Well, I'm kind of wrapped that I'm considered worthy of being on an artist's podcast. That's pretty special.
Yes. Now that I mean, for me, when we were originally starting this podcast concept, it was important for me to get someone of your caliber in. You may not consider yourself an artist, but from my dealings with the community, you are very much someone who's been involved in the artistic community. So having your input and feedback from a high level, to me, was something that was really important, because obviously how the connection was made was Olivia Garelja from Creative Northland, and she is a huge supporter of us, and we as an organisation are a huge supporter of what they do. So it felt like a very natural fit, because we've had a few podcasts where it's been dealing with the artist, and they've sort of talked about their journey and their struggles and the challenges they've faced. So hearing a bit about your story, hearing how you kind of got to where you are, 3 tenured mayor, and then also, I guess, what you feel you've achieved as a mayor in the arts community throughout Whangarei. I think those sorts of insights are incredibly important. So again, I do value your time. So thank you for coming.
Pleasure.
So I did a little bit of research, and I found some very, very interesting things.
No, where did you look?
So it's interesting. The internet is a wonderful place full of interesting knowledge. So you're finishing up your 3rd term as mayor. And I worked it out. You are the 4th longest tenured mayor with 9 years in total. That's throughout Whangarei's entire history. I was very impressed with that. You graduated North Tech in 2019 for Te Reo, which is very cool. Now, here's some of the really interesting things. You're a Northern Advocate columnist.
I was.
You were. And I read some of those articles. They're really, really good. Like, they're really fascinating. So you don't call yourself a creative yet. You're a writer. So good for you. A self-confessed garden lover who did a video offering step-by-step instructions in her own backyard, showing people how to set up traps, what bait to use, and where to place them in your garden or backyard. You've had a Kiwi named after you as well. Sheryl the Kiwi, is that right?
There's a sad story about Sheryl.
What happened?
Oh, she was run over.
No.
She was. It was really sad because that Kiwi was named, they were doing a naming process on what happened to be my birthday. And so the honour of getting a Kiwi named after you is pretty up there
absolutely.
In the scheme of things.
Definitely.
And then to hear, and she was released out at Tutakaka, I believe.
Yeah,
and,
she was.
And then a few days later, she was hit by a car and she was picked up by Robert Webb.
Yes.
And put in this bizarre kind of harness thing in the hope that her back leg would be able to be repaired.
Yep.
And, he kept her going for a little while, but sadly she died. But there's a connection to the arts here.
Sure.
Because there was a photograph taken of Sheryl, the Kiwi, in Robert Webb's hand. And Susan Dinklager has done a sculpture, a bronze sculpture of Sheryl the Kiwi in Robert Webb's hand, and that now resides, the original, in the Northland, the Quarry Gardens, Whangarei Quarry Gardens, at the entrance to the cafe.
Is that what that is?
That's what that is.
Oh, there we go. That's a very cool story. And then the last interesting thing I found about you, that according to sailworld.co.nz, you are also called Whangarei's dancing mayor. Which and Andrew, if we can just put a photo of that up there, that'd be great. It's on the internet. It's on two sites. I thought that was hilarious. You had your big cape on and you were doing a twirl, and I was like, that is so cool. Now your journey to becoming the mayor is actually quite interesting, because you were initially born in Putaruru, is that correct? And you did you do your schooling there?
Yeah, so born and bred in the very small Waikato town of Putaruru, and I'm the Pōtiki o Te Whānau, the baby of the family, and the youngest of three surviving children. Mum had more, but they died when they were babies, which would be tragic. Because I was the youngest, I didn't get involved in any of that. But so Putaruru is a very small community, and
it is.
You cannot do anything in that community when you're growing up without your parents knowing about it before you even get home. It had its advantages and disadvantages. Every door was open because you could just wander on in and eat the food out of the cupboards, and that was a really good part of it. And you can go. We went on bike rides and excursions and up to the pools, and we'd be gone for the day. And it was just a really wonderful upbringing, and I was very, very blessed to do that. So I was in Putaruru until I was about 13 or 14. So Dad worked for the local timber yards as the accountant, and got a transfer over to Rotorua. And when they said they were going to Rotorua, they gave me the option of going to either a co-ed school or the girls' high school.
Sure.
And I chose the girls' high school. And of course, the contrast between Putaruru High School, third form in those days, I think, is that year 9?
I'm 47. I know forms, and that's about it.
Yeah.
So we're good.
So in the fourth form, I went to Rotorua Girls High School, and it was that classic expectation that girls can do anything.
Yes.
But also, I was streamed into the top stream, which I'd never happened before. I just was a general average kid at school, and I did well in the exams, and I ended up being sort of into the high streams. And our principal, the headmistress, I think she preferred to be known as, would use those classic expressions of, girls, you're the creme de la creme. It was like, oh, really? Go figure.
Yeah, sure.
But it did aspire, the aspirations for us were much greater, and there was expectation that we would go to university and we would study, and that was what kids did from when they left school.
So you Rotorua, you finish your schooling there. Where do you sort of go from that point onwards?
I followed my best friend who was going to Otago University to do dentistry. And
sure,
it's what you do. You do the same as your best friend.
Absolutely.
So she and I went. She's just retired as a dentist.
No way, really?
I, on the other hand, I succeeded brilliantly in failure at university at Otago. So my first year, intermediate year, you kind of trying to prove yourself to be able to move on to into whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
So I started a BSc and succeeded in failing brilliantly. Oh, gosh, I was so proud of the failure. My parents were not.
Not so much. Nope.
And so 2 years at Dunedin at Otago University, and then realised dentistry wasn't for me. University wasn't really for me, so I came home to Rotorua, and I'd been doing holiday jobs in the parks division. So my best friend, actually, her dad was what they called the general manager or the town clerk of Rotorua District Council, or it was the county council then. And so we got holiday jobs, and I stayed on in the parks team, and really that's where my career in horticulture really began, and was inspired by people who just encouraged me to learn on the job and to do the mahi. So I really, really loved that time. And I then went to Massey University and did a diploma of horticulture.
Now, see, that makes a lot of sense because Massey's obviously very horticultural based. How long were you did you go to Palmerston North for it?
I did.
How long were you there for?
The diploma was 1 year, but you had to have done a year's practical. So the total diploma was, classified as a 2-year qualification.
So you have obviously the 1 year practical work beforehand, and then you sort of finish off from that. Interesting. So you're Palmerston North, you've got your diploma. Is it back home, or do you sort of go out and see New Zealand? Do you have an OE?
I did. I left to go to Australia.
Really?
To catch up with an old boyfriend, and who was in Perth. And now I was on the inaugural Air New Zealand direct flight from Auckland to Perth. It was a long flight, and the alcohol flowed freely. I poured off the end of that flight in a dreadful state. And, sort of had to recover for, I think it took me about 2 or 3 days before I could kind of use my tongue again.
That's a good flight.
Yeah. I recommend the flying, the direct flight flying, but do not drink alcohol on that length of flight. It's not a good thing to do.
No, that's never good. So you catch up with the old flame and you've got your degree. Where to from there?
Well, I explored Australia for a while, and then my sister back home here in New Zealand decided to get married. So, and she asked me to be her bridesmaid, as sisters do. Yep. So I came home, and that was the end of my world trip. At that stage was I got to Australia, yay! And I did quite a bit of touring around Australia and worked on prawn trawlers and boats and things like that. So it was a kind of a cool experience in my life.
That is, all of this stuff is just fascinating because, when you think of someone that sort of had the esteemed career that you've had, I wouldn't instantly go, oh no, she worked on boats for a little while. Sure, why not? I think we've had someone else on the show who worked on the boats for a little while. Yeah, it's crazy.
Well, one particular boat I jumped off of because the skipper of the boat believed he had skipper's rights, and he didn't. So that literally was, we got close enough to shore and I just jumped overboard and swam ashore because it was not a pleasant time.
Okay, so we're not even talking like docking. We're just like, I can see land, I'm off.
We'd anchored, we'd done they call them shots when you're going out and doing the prawn trawling. So you drag the cages behind the boat trawling, and you lift them up and you sort them all the gear, and then sometimes they go away for weeks at a time. I was lucky in that it was only kind of 2 or 3 nights, I think it was, and when we got back close enough to shore and anchored, that was when I literally jumped.
Just out of it. You're just like, no, I'm not doing this anymore.
The bastards.
Yes, how dare they?
Yeah.
I think that's kind of indicative of the industry, really.
Probably was at the time.
Back then.
Yeah, and then we're talking the early 80s. And but character building, they call it.
Right, yeah, sure. Let's go with character building. Yeah. So you get,
I'm sharing some really,
this is really
secrets
good.
here.
And this is just, I'm just
hardly artistic, but hey.
It's just blown away. It's like, wow, this is a journey and a half already. So you get back on land, dry yourself out, realise that being on the boats is probably not the life for you. Where to from there? You go tail between your legs back to mum and dad's? Are you like, no, I'm going to forge ahead of my own career? What do you do?
Well, I carried on in Australia for a few more months and just kept touring, but I waited for the boat to come back in and sort of got my gear because it was on the boat at the time.
Of course, yeah.
Please, sir, can I have my bag back, please? Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And, there was a bit of, please explain, but, he kind of got the message. So I carried on in Australia for a little while longer, and that was on the east coast of Australia, and then toured, met some friends, and, just did young 20-something stuff.
Oh yeah, sightseeing, ticketing, all that
drinking,
sort of
eating,
lots of drinking,
all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
and that's when I then came home for my sister's wedding, and then I think at that stage I went to work in a garden centre. So the horticulture diploma that I did was in amenity horticulture.
Okay.
So that was landscaping, and so I then started a career in garden centres.
Okay.
Which was actually a really good use of the qualification that I had.
Yeah.
And I
kind
of climbed through the ranks with garden centres to being managing them. That was what I came up to Whangarei was for a job with Plant World Gardens out at Glenbervie, and it was a new garden centre that was set up by by Don and Kathy Hutchinson,
right,
by Huanui Orchard. It's no longer open.
Yeah.
But it didn't fail because of me.
Right. Well, I was going to say, did it fail because of poor management?
No,
not at all.
And then I moved to Auckland and was managing one of the Palmer's garden centres and a couple of those. So sort of zigzagging around the countryside, but using my qualification as in horticulture, and then sort of business management and people management, really. That's where I'm. Eventually came back to Whangarei as well. Oh, the tangled webs we weaved and zigs and zags. And
I know. I mean, look, and in my 20s, I was working. My son had asked me, he was like, "Dad, where have you lived?" And I was like, Tauranga, Mount Maunganui, Hamilton, Whangarei, Auckland, Gisborne, Napier, Havelock North, Palmerston North, Masterton, Carterton, Wellington. And he was just like, I was just like, wow.
Is that it? Is that all? Is that the complete list? There must be more.
It was almost like I kind of completely blocked out the west coast of the country. I was like, I'm not going to New Plymouth. I lived in Palmerston North as well. But so I mean, you do all that sort of stuff in your 20s. You just trip around and hang out with friends and couch surf and all of those sorts of good things. So you're back in Whangarei. You've been here for over 30 years now. And you decided that you were going to get involved, like you put some roots down?
There's a story to be told, I suppose, about why
share.
I'm So when I was working in the garden centre at Glenbervie,
yes,
I had a friend who had a friend who had a 40th birthday party and out at Pipiwai. Mm-hmm. And so we went out to Pipiwai with the bottle of port that you take to parties.
Yes, of course.
And stayed the night.
Mm-hmm.
But I was dancing because, as you've rightly pointed out, I'm a dancing mayor.
You are a dancing mayor.
And I do love to dance. It's one of the really lovely things that I love, listening to music and dancing. My own dance, I'm not into all the partner thingy.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So it's all just open, free-flowing dance.
Yes. But I also learned Mendel Creative School of Dance, so there's a little bit of artistic.
Really?
Yeah, I did, yeah.
There you go. Okay. So you're out in Pipiwai, you've got your bottle of port, staying the night.
Dancing away. Laughing away, and this dude comes in and starts chatting to me and says, "You've got a wonderful laugh." He said, "I heard your laugh from another room, and I wanted to meet the person who owned that laugh and hoped that it was a woman." Sure enough,
okay,
it was.
yes.
So we had a little kind of fling thing, as you do.
As you do.
And for a brief amount of time, because he was, this is probably going to be far too personal, but he was in another relationship. And I was at that stage looking for the father of my children. Never did find a father of my children, but I found lots of people with stepchildren that I could.
Yes. No.
So,
yep.
And so he's now my husband. So
really,
we kind of been round in circles, but and he's a potter. So
really,
you mentioned potters. So I live with an artist, actually an extraordinary, creative, and fabulous.
That's amazing. We had Wendy Cunliffe on here a couple of weeks ago. Man, her story is amazing. She didn't start out with arts at all. She didn't take up pottery until she got to Whangarei. It was just fascinating.
It is fascinating. And maybe you should interview Mike, at one point, because he's got a cool story to tell as well.
I would love to.
There you go.
Thank you very kindly.
And then you can hear his version of the story.
Yeah. I'll be like, so Sheryl tells us the story about how the two of you met. Is it this or is it something different? There'll be similar points, I'm sure. So you end up meeting your husband and kind of moving from there. So I guess that's you sort of starting to settle down a little bit.
It's a little more complicated than that. I married somebody else first, but that's, who I met through, this really is a heart-to-heart, isn't it?
It is.
So
it's the joy of it.
I was also, when I was working at the garden centre, I met a lot of young farmers, and
yes.
we that was kind of who we hung out with because they were groovy guys. And the year that we had that Whangarei hosted the New Zealand Young Farmer of the Year Awards was back in 1979.
Wow.
79, 80, one of the two.
Yeah, okay.
And we've only just now hosted the Young Farmer of the Year Award again this year.
Yeah.
And it was back here in Whangarei, and I was sitting with one of the guys who was part of the Young Farmers way back then, and here he is, still farming, and I'm the man.
Yeah.
So through that, the Young Farmer of the Year Award, again, alcohol plays a lot of part to play in my story, really. Got drunk again, went to a burger bar, rang the guy that I used to know, and met at the party, and he there was a voice that answered the phone, and it was 2 or 3 in the morning, and I said, "Can I speak to Mike?" And the voice sort of said, "No, sorry, Mike's not here." I said, "I'm so sorry to wake you up at 2 in the morning." He said, "Oh, it's all right. I often get suicidal calls," and I was thinking, "Oh, crikey, I'm not one of those."
Right, yeah, no.
But anyway, I ended up marrying the owner of that voice instead.
Yep.
And then re-met Mike and
so
married him
ultimately
as well.
It all ended up coming back around to Mike. Wow.
Yeah.
That's an amazing story. What an amazing story that you guys met and then kind of parted, and then you've met, parted, and come back together.
We weren't ready for one another at that time.
No, and that's funny how that works sometimes. Sometimes you're just not in the right space in your life, and if it's what's meant to be, you'll come back together. So you're married to your first husband in Whangarei.
Yep.
And then, according to your bio, immediately became involved in a wide range of community organisations.
Oh, I did actually, yes.
Yeah? What did you do?
Well, one of the things that I was involved with was setting up the Whangarei Quarry Gardens.
Really?
Which is why it's really nice to have the sculpture of Sheryl the Kiwi
Absolutely.
in Robert Wedd's hand at the Whangarei Quarry Gardens. So that was a pretty amazing project. Conservation is one of the things that I'm really interested in as well.
Yes.
So the Pukenui Forest Charitable Trust, I was involved in the paper mill, Matakohi Limestone Island. Oh, the list goes on. I can't remember them all, to be honest.
Wow. Northland Artists Conversation are incredibly proud to support the Quarry Arts Centre. Quarry Arts Centre, amazing place, located on Selwyn Ave in Whangarei. Such a wonderfully beautiful venue. They are an art gallery, and they have some amazing exhibitions, and they also hold Te Kōwhai Print Trust as well. Another really, really cool artistic endeavour that's done as well. They will have different exhibitions and shows of all different types of medium available as well, and they're such a long-standing venue in the community as well. Highly recommend you checking them out. Fantastic place. Really, really cool to take the kids and family as well. So, Northland Arts Conversation, proud to support the Quarry Arts Centre. So, you've endeavoured to sort of get in amongst local communities and groups, and you're helping out all of these wonderful organisations. And you're working at the time for, is it still out at Glenbervie at this point?
Well...
Or are you sort of looking at making a career transition?
I ended up working with Chris Green's Garden Centre.
Okay.
And then I applied for the role of horticulture supervisor with the Whangarei District Council. So I worked in the parks team.
Right.
This is about the mid-90s.
Sure.
And so I was involved in the parks and gardens and the kind of high-profile parks. So it's carrying on that sort of horticulture tradition, but also creating spaces where people like to gather. Open spaces, parks and reserves, and creating pretty gardens and things like that.
I love the rose gardens. I think they're absolutely beautiful. I've gone there a few times. Taking my son, I always think it's such a beautiful place. It reminds me of the Frimley Park Rose Gardens in Hastings, and they're absolutely beautiful. They're lovely. So your work. This is your first foray into council, but you're just working, right?
More or less, yep.
How long are you doing that for?
About 6 years, I think, from memory, 6 or 7 years as as horticulture supervisor.
Right.
And then I moved to it's actually, because it's so long ago, I'm forgetting the sequence of things.
It's okay.
I think then I moved away, and Mike and I moved down to Te Kuiti. And because Mike's not only a potter, but he's a journalist, and he was offered a role with the Waitomo News.
Oh, right,
so he was the editor there for a brief period of time.
Okay.
And when we were living in Te Kuiti, I went to the local council and sort of said, look, I've worked for councils. Have you got any projects that I can help with? And there was one that they said, we're doing a Keep New Zealand Beautiful or some such event, and we'd like a coordinator for that. And also, if you wouldn't mind, do you know anything about waste minimisation? So it was a Clean Up New Zealand, waste minimisation. I became the local worm lady, and I went into schools and taught them how to build worm farms and reducing the waste.
Yeah.
And as I went to schools, I would always say to them, look, you can call me anything you like. Call me the worm lady, just don't call me the lady with worms. And that always got and we would talk, we would sing songs, and it was just a really cool time. And I learned a lot more about zero waste and waste minimisation. And that became a bit of a focus. We were kind of inching our way back up to Whangarei, and I got a job with the Rodney District Council as the zero waste officer, and worked there for a little while. And then Mike was offered a job back here in Whangarei with the Advocate as one of their subs. So we came home.
Right.
And at that point, I was also this is when I got into my writing articles for the newspaper. It was the Slash Trash column. Is that the one that you saw?
When I had a look at it, it was like there was some different articles about youth in the CBD. They were a lot more recent articles.
Those are probably my mayoral columns.
I would say so. Yes. Yeah. Really good reads too. Very well written, might I add.
Thanks.
So you're doing the articles in the Northern...
In the Leader.
The Whangarei Leader. Wow, okay.
And so I was involved with that as a campaign to reduce waste. That must have been just before the elections in 2004.
Okay.
Because I stood for council in 2004 and for the Denby ward. And Pamela Peters was the mayor. That she got elected that election because Craig Brown was not standing, And so for my first term on council as a councillor, Pamela Peters was the mayor, and I was the Denby ward, which of course is Kamo and Tikiponga and Whangarei. And I just loved being the councillor for this area.
Yep.
And I was re-elected in 2007.
Lovely.
And Stan Seminoff was elected the mayor. And Stan and I clashed something chronic.
Now, was this Stan's first run or second run?
Second.
Second run.
He served when the councils amalgamated in 1989.
Yes.
Stan was the first mayor for the Whangarei District Council. So he served from 1989 to 1998, and then Craig Brown became the mayor for a couple of terms, and then Pamela, and then Stan made a comeback.
He did, which was interesting to see. I think there was only, in Whangarei's history of mayors, I think there'd only been one other mayor throughout the entire run that had actually had they'd had a run, a couple of other people then had another run, and I found that absolutely fascinating, because we're like, was there a sort of something that in his mindset that made him go, I'll have another go at it?
I guess he might have seen something that he felt there was unfinished business or whatever it was. And interestingly enough, even though we clashed on fundamental principles of for me, recognising culture, heritage, history, Māori culture, the parks and reserves, and that was the global financial crisis. And I've always said, actually, Stan was probably the best mayor for that time, because he was very hard-nosed, business-minded, and would cut costs, unnecessary costs. And unfortunately, it was those sort of the creative and the artistic side of what council supported were cut heavily. And I, in the scheme of things, and he was also very austere and didn't want to put rates up. And so we agreed to disagree on a number of things, but I still, had my right to be as an elected representative, so I had every right to say my piece in the debate.
Yeah, because you're speaking for the people of your region or the ward. Yeah,
and people who have similar interests and to me, and it's important, and I believe that absolutely fundamentally with democracy, that's why you have a lot of people, because they have different ideas. And when you bring lots of people with different ideas together, the outcome of a decision is better than just an autocrat, although sometimes I really wish I could make the decisions by myself.
I was going to say, I'm sure there are times in your mayoralship where you've been like, you know what, if I could just make a decision myself, that'd be easy.
Yes.
Yeah. I think we all have that. Lord knows I certainly have. I digress. So how many terms did you do as the Denby ward councillor?
Just those 2 terms, so six years, and because there was a risk that Stan would be re-elected, I hope he's listening. He won't be, but you never know. But that was the reason why I chose not to stand. And Stan wasn't re-elected. Maurice Cutforth became the mayor in that term. Yep. But Mike and I took the opportunity to travel overseas, and we lived in Italy for a year. And we lived la dolce vita. Mamma mia.
Living the life.
It was the best. We were away for a year, a month, a week, and a day. And I deliberately did that. We came home so that he would write a book. Yeah. He hasn't.
He still hasn't gotten around to it. No.
I've got all the photographs, you know, all the we wrote lots of blogs and stories and things, and eventually if I nudge him enough, he might get round to writing that book.
That would be an amazing book to read. That'd be very cool. So why Italy? And why specifically year, month, week, day? What was the thought process behind that?
Initially, we were thinking we would travel overseas, and we actually did a teaching English as a second language course, because we thought we might be able to travel with that. And the more research we looked into, we thought, well, either we'll teach English or we'll look after other people's properties or pets or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And at the time, I thought there would be a website that had, for grey-haired travellers or, whatever.
Sure.
There wasn't. And probably at that time I should have done that website because it probably would have. Anyway, long story short, I didn't. But we found a website called workaway.info. I'm pretty sure it's still going.
Okay.
And it's a site where, you know how woofers, the willing workers on organic farms.
Yes.
So they, people give of their time and you're fed and, you do the mahi and you get rewarded.
Absolutely.
Well, workaway.info is a similar sort of concept, but you're not actually working on organic farms. It's we ended up looking after a high quality. What's the thing I'm looking for? You'll cut this out.
That's okay. Well, no.
Oh, go on.
No, we're going to leave this in. This is great.
Oh, mean. This is my tired brain going, where were we? What were we doing? We were looking after a resort where people would go.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
So like a holiday park?
It was actually a 13th century olive grove that had been converted into accommodation and people would pay lots and lots of money to come and swim in the pool and enjoy the gardens. But in the winter in Italy, it's freezing cold and nobody wants to have their summer holidays in the cold. Nope. So the woman who owned it was an expat and she had dogs and chickens and cats and gardens that needed tending. So we did that while she went and had a deserved break. And we looked after that property. It was called Prato di Sotto, which is the field above. And it was on Monte Corona, and so it's in Umbertide in Perugia, in Umbria.
Okay.
On the side of a mountain that had a monastery at the top, and they were still were ringing the bell. And, it was a Roman road, the white Roman road that meandered up the hill, olive groves,
wow.
So we harvested olives and so we found that and we made contact with the woman Penny and said, we're from New Zealand and we're thinking of, she was offering a role. And she said, New Zealand. I had somebody else from New Zealand come and help me.
Yeah.
And because we were thinking this has got to be too good to be true. And she said, yeah, they were from Waipu.
No.
Yes. So we got in contact with the people from Waipu.
Yes.
And they verified that
it's legitimate.
What you see is what you get.
Yeah.
And so we stayed there for a little bit of time. We also got a job at a yoga retreat closer to Rome, and Mike was the pool boy, and we were helping with food and food prep and all that sort of thing. So we weren't doing the yoga. Trust me, we're not into.
I was going to say the story just gets even more amazing.
Yes. And we also spent a month in France and a month in Ireland and just Scotland and checking out the whiskey because Mike's a single malt whiskey lover.
Man after my own heart.
Yeah, so it was only fair that we went, and I think that was the time when Mike was really horrified when I was on the malting floor of Lafroig, and I smelt the peat fires.
Yes.
Malting the barley, and my lights kind of turned on. And I thought, so I get it now. And he went, no, my whiskey collection is under threat. It's not. I still just like to sniff it, but it was a really cool thing to do.
Okay. Wow. What a great holiday.
It was.
That's a hell of an OE.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that made up for the time that I only got to Australia.
Well, I was going to say, it's Australia. It's a quick across a ditch and then you come back. So you're away for a year, a month, a week and a day, and then you come back. Morris cut forth as mayor. I've met Morris. I found him to just be absolutely lovely and such a very kind gentleman. Anytime I've talked with him, he's been very giving of his time, which I've always just appreciated. And what are your next steps? Because you've done the councillor. Are you going to look at going for a mayoral run at this point?
Well, that wasn't the intention. However, Morris, unfortunately, very early in his term as mayor, had a stroke, and it impacted his desire actually to continue on. So he'd made the decision not to stand in the 2013 elections.
Yeah, sure.
And when we came home from our year, a month, a week and a day, And we were living in Auckland for a little while. In fact, I worked for the crime reporting line for police. It was one of those jobs that you got, because Mike was easily employed as a sub-editor.
Yeah, sure.
And I just, kind of needed to get a job, and that was it was actually an incredible job. Boy, oh boy. You hear some stories about what's going on in this country that you wouldn't otherwise hear.
Yeah, I could imagine.
However, again, it was, we knew we'd come home to Whangarei eventually, and Mike was offered a job back here. And
of course he was.
The questions were, for us, how long have you been back? That was the first question. And the second one was, to me, are you going to stand for the mayoralty? And more and more people were starting to ask me that question, and I thought, well, maybe I could.
Okay.
So I did.
You obviously haven't been back in Whangarei that long whilst these sort of conversations are happening. What was it that kind of made you go, yes, I will stand? Is there sort of one thing in particular? Was it a culmination of things?
It was a belief in, if it's right, it'll happen.
Okay. So you have your first campaign.
Got on my scooter.
You did.
Do you remember my scooter campaign? The billboards with me on a scooter. I had, in Auckland, I had seen a woman scoot past me on a push scooter.
Yep.
And she had grey hair. This thing about grey hair, I've obviously got a thing about grey hair. And I thought, if she can scoot, so can I. So I
Why not?
bought a scooter, and it was my mode of transport. It was really quick. Particularly in Auckland, you don't want to get into a car in Auckland because you're just sitting in fumes for a long
I lived in Auckland for 7 years. No.
So scooter was great, and I came home to Whangarei and was scooting everywhere.
Yep.
And I thought, I'll use that in my mayoral campaign. So Diane Stoppard, who's an amazing photographer, took all my photographs for the campaign, and I had this idea that instead of doing billboards in landscape,
yes,
I would do them in portrait.
Okay.
So I was standing on my scooter, in my sort of corporate grey suit,
yes.
Looking like a mayor.
Yep.
And but with the whimsy and the idea that we need to think differently about where we're going as a district.
Yes.
So I won the mayoralty. There were 12 candidates because it was an empty seat. And I'm sure there'll be a similar sort of number now that they know that my seat's going to be empty for this election. And out of 12, I got the most votes, but kind of, nudged out the boys.
Was it a convincing, concise victory? Was it close?
It was far enough for me to recognise that. I think I got 5,500 votes or something like that. The next candidate was about three or 3.5.
Wow. Okay.
So the votes were spread across the 12 candidates, and sort of everybody got some, but I got the most, and it's first past the post.
It certainly is.
And that was me. Yeah.
So talk me through your first term, because obviously you've done a couple of terms as the councillor, you've had your year away, and then you've come back and just decided to really throw yourself into the mayoral candidacy and win. Congratulations.
Thanks.
In your first term, are there sort of milestones or markers that you kind of want to tick off, like I want to do this and I want to do that and I want to get these things done? What is it about the first term that sort of has a flow-on effect for subsequent terms? Because obviously this is you're wrapping up your third year. So what is it about the first year, the first term, that kind of sets up the next two?
Well, I don't know if you recall, in 2013, the Honderwasser project was a topic for campaigning in the mayoralty. People, because the Morris's council were progressing ahead with Honderwasser. It was a controversial project, and people were asking the questions: are you for or against Honderwasser in the mayoral race?
Right.
And people were going to vote accordingly. My stance was I supported the project, but that I would navigate our way through, because I wanted the community, if it was going to proceed, I wanted the community to actually really want it to proceed.
Yep.
And if they really didn't, then it was going to be a tricky thing to navigate through. So and the people who wanted Hundertwasser to go ahead didn't vote for me because I didn't come out saying I'm for Hundertwasser.
Right, okay.
And the people who didn't want Hundertwasser didn't vote for me because I didn't say I didn't want Hundertwasser.
Yep.
But I think it struck a chord with obviously enough people to figure out, she's got what it takes to be the mayor, got the experience, and is going to look at hard issues, but work them through.
Yeah.
I also campaigned on focusing on youth and the arts, interestingly enough.
There we go.
And because I felt that the community was ready for moving more into investment into the things that matter to a community.
Yep.
I've been really lucky because previous councils have invested heavily into infrastructure, and we're fighting the Three Waters reforms because in the past, we've had great councils who have looked at water storage in the way of dams. That we've just opened the new Faux Valley water treatment plant, which will treat water to a very high standard for the next 50 odd years.
That's amazing.
We've been very quietly just doing the work and making sure that those core critical infrastructure needs are met for the community in an affordable way. And Stan, actually, to his credit too, was also on about keeping the roads and the water and all the things that we have to do as a council. We provide for the community to a high standard. Where was I? Going back to the campaign. So the H-bomb, I called it, because the council of the day had sufficient people to pull it out of the plan. It was a dark day in my mayoralty. Very early on, I was elected in October, and I think we had meetings by April or May of the next year.
Yeah.
And it was gone from the plan.
They pulled completely.
The decision was made to remove it from the long-term plan. The community, bless them, loved them to bits. They said, this is not good enough, we're going to bring it back. Because we then went to the community and said, okay, if we're not going to do Hundertwasser, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
And we had a referendum. And the referendum had three options. One was to build Hundertwasser, one was to, and we put out a competition. Harbourside was the second one, or demolish the building and just have a flat grass surface.
Right, okay, yep.
Hundertwasser won more than half the votes. And so we then put some criteria around the people to raise the funds, and bingo, we now...
Yeah, I remember there was a period of time where one of the shops in town, you could go in and they had all the proposed plans and pictures, and you could sign a petition. I signed it because I thought it was a really good idea. I wasn't living in Whangarei at the time. I was actually living in Auckland, and I remember coming up and just having a wander through the township, and I was like, that is actually really cool, and it's something really unique. Yes, I will 100% support that. So I'm glad I helped.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Because the Hundertwasser project has been a long time in the making. Obviously, I guess 8 years.
Oh no, way longer than that. Yep. In Stan's original term as mayor, he met Frederick Hundertwasser.
Wow.
And asked him to design a art gallery. For Whangarei. And on a napkin, Hundertwasser drew, and he called it healing the building, the old harbour board building.
Yeah, okay.
And he designed it, and that's the design we have today.
That's wow.
Cool,
hey?
Hey?
It's absolutely amazing. So we get Hundertwasser open, and that's been going since February this year. You are successfully re-elected as mayor again for a second term, and then you get elected again as mayor for a third term, I will put my hand up and say I voted for you.
Thanks.
You're welcome. As someone who was an import from the region, I relied a lot on what I heard from other people, and your reputation, apparent, and from everything that you'd done in your mayoralty at that point, was spoken of very highly. And there was one person that was very, very kind of what you did, and that was actually Morris Cutforth. And it was one of those really amazing conversations. I got to sit down with him, and I do treasure those a lot, because he stuck with me. He was like, I think I met him within the first 6 months of moving to Whangarei at one of my old jobs, and just such a lovely gentleman. So you're in the last 83.
Today marks 83 days to go.
And you're electing not to run again.
Yes.
Why?
People say to me, have you had enough? And I say, no, I've done enough. I have absolutely loved my job in the last 9 years. I've been privileged to have been part of the growth and development of the district. We've done some really groovy things like the Hatia Loop. Everybody loves the loop.
Yes.
And of course, Honotwasa was completed thanks to the fabulous community. And we put in Putahi Park, which is just an attraction. Kids are in that water fountain.
Yes, they are.
When it's freezing.
Yep.
And they're running through, and I saw dogs running through the other day.
They don't care.
They don't care.
No, they don't.
It's a fabulous space, and that will really come into its own. The whole Hatia Loop is well used and well loved, and people are complaining it's not wide enough now. I'll tell you a little story. Back in the 90s, when I was in the Parks Division, we put in the Millennium sculpture, the Waka and Wave sculpture.
Yep, I know the one.
So I specified the park that led to the Waka and Wave sculpture, and back in the 90s, it was the whole peninsula was wet, covered in mangroves. Yep. Nobody went there. It was like, and we were going to put a sculpture down there. People were scratching their heads, going, "Why?"
Yeah.
And I specified a 2.5 metre wide path, and I was accused of wasting concrete because nobody was going to go down there. Why would you, ever? And now it probably could be 4 metres wide, and it's still not wide enough.
The Hatia Loop is something that my son and I have done numerous times. We love it. He likes go over past the Waka and Wave, and you go over the bridge. There's a little pocket park just there, man. He's 10 and a half, and we still go there. He loves it. It's Hatia Loop, absolutely amazing. But I think one of the interesting things is you've left behind a real legacy, because you've had such an ongoing impact in the community. Hatia Loop, as you said, and Hundavasa under your tenure, dies and then gets reborn and then fully comes to fruition. So, I mean, you could essentially say that whilst, yes, this is a podcast for creatives, you have had a very large hand in helping create essentially Whangarei's new identity.
Yeah, I don't want to take the credit for that, because the community, it's been community driven. Yes. I've been lucky enough to be the mayor who gets interviewed and talks about it, but the community really pushed for it. And that's what the legacy I leave, I think, is that our community has grown and thrived and blossomed and found itself. We're proud of where we are. We're proud of who we are. We're proud of the things that we've done for and with and by each other. So that, to me, is the thing that I have most pride, I guess, in is not what I've done, but what we've done together as a community. And not only have we done things that you see above ground, we've invested, continue to invest below ground. We've done lots of forward planning. We've adopted documents that I hope will never gather dust, that the next council will refer to them and go, this is what the vision has been. This is the direction we're going in. It feels good. We might divert a little from that, because that's inevitable.
Yep.
However, the long-term strategic visionary things that we've worked together collaboratively on, those will come to fruition. I'll come back from our travels around this fabulous country for a year or so, probably another year, a month, a week and a day, and I'll come home like we did after Italy. I came home and actually the council had worked really hard on a section of the Hatia Loop, and I looked at it and I went, wow, this is world class.
Absolutely.
And that's what we need to aspire to, and that's what we deserve. We really, that's the quality that we're building into the assets. We're incorporating culture. We're early on in all projects, we're connecting with mana whenua.
Yes.
And we are getting their input, and we are telling their stories, because they are really, really important. And that's the whole storytelling aspect of the interpretation panels. If you take the time and read, there's just magic in amongst that, and that will grow. That's the more and more and more we'll get to know local history and local stories. So that's what I'm proud of.
Yeah, and you have every reason to be proud of that. I mean, as someone who was raised in Gisborne, Ngāti Porou, there's always been a huge emphasis on understanding the culture, not only from the European perspective, but also I always took a huge interest in the Māori perspective as well, and in the years they were here before that. So to see that really thrive in Northland and Whangarei as a whole, for me, it's very much like coming home.
One of the magic things that happened in my term as mayor was the Tuia 250. So we had the two types of vessels coming around, following the path that Kupe and Captain Cook, so those the two stories, and that was a really magic meeting at Hihiawa, having the people who'd been on the Wakakorua, and they were they'd travelled from basically Hawaii, but Rarotonga, and they were coming and reconnecting to those places of landing and significance. And you talked about Gisborne, that they were there as well. It was a really amazing thing.
Yeah, definitely a very, very special time, but also a very culturally significant time as well, because we're taking the time to acknowledge it and really make it part of the heritage and the whakapapa, which I think is amazing.
And we're going to be teaching that in history. What a significant change in the way we think about this Aotearoa New Zealand, where in future the stories of our own history will be told.
Yeah.
I mean, when I was a kid, we had Captain Cook, and that's what we learned about.
Absolutely.
We didn't learn about Kupe.
Nope.
And I tell you what, that up in Mania footprints and the wonderful asset that it's a tired brain, up in the Hokianga, is absolutely vital to go and see. It's so cool, telling the story of Kupe.
83 days, your tenure ends. And obviously we've just spoken about the collaborative effort that you've kind of helped with that. After 9 years, what are you going to do? You've already spoken a bit about travelling, but there's a finite point on that. What happens after that?
I have no idea.
Oh, that's brilliant.
After the travels, who knows? The world's our oyster.
A book.
2 books.
2 books. There we go. That's just amazing. But, what an amazing time that you leave behind. Sheryl Mai, thank you. My goodness. I'm, again, so honoured to have you come into the studio. It's been an absolute blessing. So on behalf of myself and the 5 Elements team, thank you very much for coming and sitting down with us.
I've told you far too many stories.
I know, and they're all going to be on YouTube. It's amazing. Thank you very much.
You.
Well, I mean, that was Sheryl Mai, ladies and gentlemen. Wow.
Yeah. What a conversation that was. Yeah.
Honestly, I'm still sitting here completely floored.
Yeah.
By just what were the big takeaways for you out of this one?
How much she'd travelled and like the nature of her travel and kind of getting into, you know, was it shrimp boats or prawn boats?
So she had gone on the shrimp boats, and how she had also just been on the normal boats as well, and how and her story about how she was like, nope, had enough, and just literally they didn't even dock, they just dropped anchor, and she's like, sweet, and gone.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't do that in Aussie. Fuck, you get eaten by a shark.
What the hell?
But no, fascinating. Yeah, it's quite funny. Like, I just didn't expect that story at all.
As you know, as we were sort of starting off, it was like, we kind of, you go through that feeling out process where you're talking with your guests, and then you kind of start asking questions, and then that leads into more questions, and it just kept coming. She talked about, Potato, and it's like, okay, cool. And she goes to school in Rotorua, and then she's like, well, I'm off to Dunedin, and it's like, oh, okay, where are we getting?
I'm off to a party out Pipiwai with a bottle of port.
Exactly. And then she's like, I want to go to Italy for a year, a week, a month, a year, a month, a week, and a day. And then she's telling us so specifically, it's this place, it's located here, and this is it. And she's just like so minute on the detail. It's like that. She obviously has such amazing recollection about it.
She said she wasn't very creative, but the way she talks, she kind of paints the picture in your head for you, So I think that's kind of a creative aspect.
Brilliant. Yeah, she definitely does. Like she uses the words, and she conjures up the imagery in your head.
For sure.
Like as she's talking about the white Roman paved roads, you're like, I'm right there with you.
Because that did strike me. Like I almost painted my own picture in my head of that whole scene. I was like,
and she's talking about
I got to get out of this country at one point.
I know, and she's talking about the villa from the 13th century and the olive farms, and I'm sitting there going, man, she'd be like, I'm just gonna sit here with some tapas and some bread and just all sort of cool stuff. It was just, as I said, I'm just still completely floored by it. It was so for all of the people that are going to want to watch or listen to this podcast, where can people find this?
So visually, let me consult my
notebook.
Visually, you can find us on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. That's all at The Northland Artist Conversation. For audio, you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts, and that's all under The Northland Artist Conversation. And if you're an artist that is coming into the region or is from the region and wants to come and do a podcast with us, sit down with us and have a chat, our email is hello@northlandartistconversation.co.nz.
Perfect. Yeah, definitely. And if you're someone that has kind of followed us and what we've been doing, and you're like, these guys are really, really going well, and you want to contribute, we also have a Patreon page set up as well. And Patreon is a way for you to give back a little bit more to the podcast. So we have two different tiers. We have the first tier, which is called Cup of Coffee, and that is $5 a month. And then we have our second tier, which I've affectionately named as Coffee Addict, and that's $20 a month. The pricing for that is in Australian dollars. It's as close as I could get. I think you get like American, Canadian, Australian, and I think UK was the other one. So went for the Australian one. So it is the closest you can get. With the Coffee Addict tier, you do get a few extra perks which are quite nice, and we're going to be keeping an eye on that as well, because with Sheryl being such a very high profile guest, we're hopefully going to see a few more people come back as well. And by the time Sheryl's conversation comes out, we'll be 6 or 7 podcasts deep. And we've been pretty solid and pretty consistent, and having had a look at all of the comments and the feedback and the emails and even the private messages I get, people are really, like, the general consensus is, I didn't even know this person was in the area, or I learned so much from this person. And I think, Sheryl is really continuing on with that.
And we've had artists stick around and actually comment on our stuff as well.
Yeah,
like that we've already interviewed. Like Aki always comments, and it's really cool to see her
does,
on there, so.
you know, and you know, even artists that haven't been on the podcast are also commenting as well, and they're like, you know, this is really, really good. You know, let's keep this going. So, you know, you know who you are, and I'm coming for you, and I am going to get you into that chair.
Shane Evans.
Shane Evans. And yeah.
What a way to finish.
I know. What an amazing finish to such an amazing conversation in general. So straight down that camera. My name is Mark Kelly.
And I'm Andrew McKenzie.
And we are the Northland Artist Conversation. Thank you very much. We will see you guys soon.